Hello and welcome to HITC Sport. Right, how many football clubs are influenced by international tournaments? It's such a lazy way of recruitment. Scouts will see a player deliver in 2 or 3 games at a World Cup or European Championship and immediately decide is the answer to their problems. I'm going to take a look at every Premier League club and find one flop they stupidly and blindly signed off the back of one good international tournament. Right, let's go. Arsenal ANDREAS. Yeah, remember that brief summer where ANDREAS was seen as one of the best players on planet Earth? Sure, he ripped Euro 2008 in half with Russia, but let's be honest, this wasn't even a one tournament wonder. He only had 2 good games. Literally, he was banned for the first 2 games of Euro 2008. People forget that. And so the 3rd game he played was just a 3-0 defeat to Spain, where he barely touched the ball. Apparently that was enough for the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid to want him. The dangers of a one-off tournament, lads. He wound up at Arsenal for a club record £50 million, and sure, he had his moments, like scoring 4 at Anfield or netting the winner against Barcelona, but mostly he spent his 4 years at Arsenal stuffed in a duffel coat and shoved on the bench. Aston Villa Trezeguet. Has Trezeguet been an Aston Villa flop? If they'd gone down last year, 100%. He was dangerously close to becoming one last year. Let's say the jury is still out on this Egyptian winger. He arrived last summer from Turkish club Kasımpaşa for £9 million, and I guarantee you, no Villa scout would have ever heard of him were it not for the 2018 World Cup. Sure, Egypt finished bottom of their group, but he still started all 3 games and caught the eye. Admittedly though, that was probably because he was named after a guy who once missed a penalty in a World Cup final. He's been alright, but probably not worth £9 million. Brighton ALIREZA JAHANBAKHSH. Okay, when compared to some of these lumps of fudge, ALIREZA JAHANBAKHSH wasn't really a flop for Brighton, but he wasn't worth £18 million either. The 27-year-old is a talented Iranian winger, but he spent a year stuck in the Brighton treatment room, waited nearly 18 months for his first goal. Lads. Anyway, he signed 2 years ago off the back of the 2018 World Cup, where he played all 3 games for Iran, beating Morocco 1-0, losing by just 1 goal against Spain, and snatching a last-minute draw with Portugal. To be fair, he'd also slammed home over 20 goals in the Dutch league for AZ Alkmaar, so I'm surprised he didn't have bigger clubs sticking over his face. Burnley Brady. Okay, I hate to do this considering Brady gave me my greatest ever moment in sport, but lads, let's face facts, he's been a Burnley flop. Sure, the Irish winger had a dream Euro 2016, scoring an 85th minute winner against Italy to send Ireland to the last 16, and he even scored against France in the next round. Oh, what a hero. But within 6 months, Burnley were making the most expensive player in their history, dragging him in from Norwich for £30 million. Listen, sure, he slammed home a free kick in his debut in a 1-1 draw against Chelsea, great, but he's only scored 2 league goals since, 3 goals in over 60 games. He spent half the time stuffed on the sidelines. Yeah, he's been a very poor signing. Chelsea won CUADRADO. Oh, without a doubt, the answer here is Juan CUADRADO. Listen, this guy ripped up the 2014 World Cup in Colombia, scoring against Japan, racking up a joint most 4 assists. Sure, James Rodriguez was stealing the limelight, but CUADRADO was still one of the stars of the tournament. So 6 months later, he gets a £23 million switch from Fiorentina to Chelsea, with the Blues chucking Mo Salah the other way on loan. He played 50 games, didn't score, looked incredibly ineffective under Jose Mourinho before being chucked back to Italy. Good Christ, what a failure. Crystal Palace Lee Chung-young. Okay, to be fair, Crystal Palace hadn't been fooled by too many international stars. I suppose the closest I can pick is Lee Chung-young. You know, that former Bolton winger who rocked up at Sellers Park in 2015? Listen, at the time he was 27. The previous year he'd started all 3 games for South Korea at the 2014 World Cup and must have looked half decent because Alan Pardew quickly chucked him in his team. He wasn't a complete disaster and he did score against Shrewsbury and Stoke, but 2 goals in 50 games? For a winger, that is awful. Everton Ashley Williams. Oh, Ashley Williams, what a complete and utter mess. Listen, you can maybe understand why Ronald Koeman chucked £12 million at Swansea for Ashley Williams in August 2016. Sure, he was 32, but he just captained Wales, yes, Wales, to the semi-finals of Euro 2016. This guy was supposed to be Phil Jagielka's heir at Everton, the answer to their defensive problems. In the end though, during his 2 seasons as 16 league games at the club, he mostly played like a melted lump of earwax. He was involved in the club's worst start to a season. He started a brawl between fans at a game against Lyon before being dumped on a loan at Stoke. Honestly, just one of the worst signings in the history of the club. Fulham RAGNAR Sigurdsson. Ah yes, when Icelandic footballers put themselves in the English football shop window after dumping out the 3 lines at Euro 2016. What a great job audition. Listen, that was the tournament of Iceland's lives. Reaching the quarterfinals of European Championship, sending England home, absolutely glorious. Anyway, Fulham fell into the trap of overrating one tournament wonders. RAGNAR Sigurdsson was one of the centre halves who immediately earned himself a move from Krasnodar to Fulham in the Championship. He played 17 games, scored against Ipswich, but mostly looked bang average, and was quickly chucked back to Russia with ROBBIE Kazan. Leeds ROQUE Jr. This was just sad. With Leeds being strangled by a financial meltdown in 2003, they were forced to just sign freebies and loans. But ROQUE Jr. looked a coup at the time, a Champions League winning defender with AC Milan who 1 year earlier had started in defence for Brazil as they won the World Cup. But he made 5 appearances for Leeds, looked utterly out of his depth, and the club were relegated. Not really sure what happened there. Leicester BARTOSZ. When you win the Premier League, you should probably start shopping at a higher level than what you're used to. Leicester City responded to this historic title win by bringing in the likes of BRADY, a Polish winger for £7.5 million. The 19-year-old midfielder rival from KS Cracovia has proven to be an utter flop. He spent 4 years in England, never played a single Premier League minute, before being spat out to Legia Warsaw this year. What an utter waste of £7 million. He was clearly signed off the back of a good Euro 2016 tournament for Poland, in which he produced a man of the match performance in a win over Northern Ireland. The guy who's being talked about in the media as a potential future star, and that was clearly enough to fool Claudio Ranieri. Liverpool ELHADJI JUAN. Okay, there's a few I could choose, but the obvious answer is the bone of ice spinning machine ELHADJI JUAN. Is it any surprise his £10 million switch to Liverpool was confirmed after just one game of 2002 World Cup when he tore the reigning world champions France to shreds in a shock 1-0 win. The Reds clearly knew that he would have every club in Europe chasing this lance forward, and to be fair, Senegal did reach the quarterfinals. Pele talked him up as one of the greatest players in the world, and then he absolutely stunk up the Premier League. 6 goals in nearly 80 games, he spat on a ball boy, was hated by his teammates before being farmed out the Bolton within 2 years. What an utter waste of £10 million. Man City ANDREAS Isaacson. Yeah, this was pretty specialist in terms of god-awful signings. Back in 2006, yes, Man City were poor at the time, but they'd actually stumbled upon a couple of half-decent up-and-coming goalkeepers. But instead of trusting either Kasper Schmeichel or Joe Hart in net, they instead unnecessarily spent £2 million on Red goalie ANDREAS Isaacson. And why not? He'd replaced Petr Cech at club level out of France, but more importantly, was first-choice goalie for Sweden at the 2006 World Cup, where they qualified alongside England from Group B before being put out by Germany in the next round. City probably thought they'd secured a coup for a 26-year-old Swedish first-choice goalie. Now, he mostly struggled with injuries at Eastlands, played less than 20 league games in 2 seasons before ending his City career in the most embarrassing way possible, conceding 8 away at Middlesbrough. Oh good Christ. Man United Marcos Rojo. I'm tempted to pick Danny Blind, Owen Hargreaves, or even Fabio BARTOSZ, but no, the best answer for a guy signed for no other reason than a good international tournament is Marcos Rojo. Does anyone really think this bird-brain defender would have been on Man United's radar had he not just reached the World Cup final playing left back for Argentina? He didn't even look that impressive at the tournament, but was immediately snapped up by Louis van Gaal for nearly £20 million from Sporting Lisbon. 6 years later, he's still contracted to the club, but what is he? 7th choice centre half? Maybe even 8th? Newcastle Daryl Janmaat. Yeah, here's another example of a bank average player tricking the world with a good tournament showing. Listen, Daryl Janmaat had an incredible 2014 World Cup playing right wing back for Holland under Louis van Gaal, providing assists in big famous wins against Spain and Brazil. He was part of a Dutch team which finished 3rd in the world. Suddenly he had Man United sniffing around him. So Newcastle probably thought they pulled off a coup when Alan Pardew got him to sign a 6-year deal at the club. Yeah, no, he was largely useless, defensively inept, part of a spineless Newcastle team which fell off the map under John Carver and were then relegated the following season. Christ, he even got himself involved in a confrontation with Newcastle fans after a 1-0 defeat at Stoke, and then he broke his hand after punching a wall at Southampton, ruling him out for 4 games in an important relegation scrap before being sold to Watford. Utterly pitiful. Sheffield United, nobody. Okay, congrats Sheffield United. I could not find a single example of your club being tricked by international tournaments. So well done lads, clearly the people who've been picking your signings aren't ruled by brain-dead short-termism logic. Southampton, Andreas Jakobsson. Yeah, how many of you actually remember this guy? Back in 2004, Andreas Jakobsson was a 31-year-old Swedish defender who helped his country to the Euro 2004 quarterfinals. This was enough for Southampton to snap him up from Bromby, but he played nearly 30 games as the club were relegated from the Premier League. He should probably just stayed in Sweden. Tottenham, BONGANI'estec KHUMALO. I'm tempted to pick DeAndre Yedlin, who got his big Premier League move at 21 following a decent 2014 World Cup for the USA. The fact is 6 years later and he's still earning a living in this league, despite being a right back who clearly can't defend. I still can't work that one out. But the obvious answer here is BONGANI'estec KHUMALO. I guarantee if it wasn't for the 2010 World Cup, where he had the world spotlight on him as a South African centre half for the host nation, scoring in that famous 2-1 win over France, then nobody at Tottenham would have had a clue who he was. But just 4 months after that historic goal, Harry Redknapp signs him up for £1.5 million from SuperSport United after passing a trial. He lasted 5 years in North London and he never played a single game. West Brom have Robson Kanu. Listen, is it any surprise that nobody wanted to have Robson Kanu in 7 seasons for Reading, and then he scores a famous winner for Wales against Slovakia at Euro 2016, then pulls off a Cruyff turn to send the Belgian defence for a hot dog in the quarter-finals, and suddenly he's left Reading within 6 weeks. To be fair, this wasn't the big money Spanish move that he'd wanted, but still, it was the Premier League with West Brom. Yeah, now he's since been relegated, and I know he scored 10 goals last season to get them back up, but less than 20 league goals in 114 games for the club. Christ, even Saido Berahino would laugh at that. West Ham, Javier Mascherano. Okay, without a doubt, Javier Mascherano. West Ham signed this massively overrated kid off the back of one semi-decent World Cup with Argentina back in 2006. What was all the fuss? He couldn't even get past Hayden Mullins. Just kidding lads, don't worry, don't have a meltdown. Obviously I know Mascherano was world class. Let's try this again. West Ham, Ener Valencia. Okay, now we're talking. Let's go back to the 2014 World Cup. Ener Valencia scores in Ecuador's first game against Switzerland, then both goals and a 2-1 win over Honduras. West Ham immediately paid Valencia £12 million for this Ecuadorian striker, probably thought they'd unearthed a superstar, and then he then scores 8 league goals in 54 games before being chucked out to Mexico. Not great. Wolves, HENRI CAMARA. Okay, to be fair, HENRI CAMARA wasn't exactly a Wolves flop, but he also wasn't what they'd hoped he'd be. Like JUAN, CAMARA was part of that Senegal team who shocked the world in the 2002 World Cup, though the following year, Wolves bring him to the Premier League from Sudan for £1.5 million. This guy was supposed to be the exciting striker who kept them up. Now, in his only season at Molyneux, he scored just 7 goals in 30 games, gets relegated before being immediately loaned out to Celtic, Southampton, and then sold to Wigan. Pretty poor. Anyway, that's it for the lads. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and as always, I'll talk to you in a while.